I'm Dr. Mobcrank. In this series, we're going to be creating a fully functioning BlackJack game inside Minecraft using command blocks, NPCs, and map art. As you can see, we've covered this entire area with white wool, and now we're just going to go in and fine-tune each card one at a time. Use structure blocks to copy the symbols for the suits. This is very handy because now not only can we turn around and paste those symbols, we can also rotate the symbols. It's a great time saver. Then I'll open up a locator map, and once I'm satisfied, open up a regular map, and voila, one down, 51 to go. We just tuck that away. I've got these organized in 4 separate chests based on the suit. Okay, before we dive in, I've got some tips. If you plan on following this build step by step, I would recommend opening up a super flat world and matching my coordinates exactly. It'll be easier for you to follow should things go sideways. I'd also like to point out that this is an advanced build and it's going to be time consuming. If you'd like to take on something a little more bite-sized, check out the previous video I did on the slot machine build. Very similar concept. Next, wherever you create that chunk to build your maps, keep it very far away from everything, especially from your BlackJack game. You do not want to open up a map near that chunk. As you can see here, it will replace that previous card with whatever the new map, the new data looks like. And as we can see here, it will ruin every copy of that card in the world. AKA, it's going to ruin your deck. And if you haven't backed up your world in a bit, that could also ruin your day. Next tip, I like to keep these around. Nice to quickly toggle between creative and survival. Here's an option. If you don't want to build the deck, use some signs. And it's kind of a cheap, quick alternative. Speaking of signs, I like to label all the structures. Make sure you're saving constantly and be careful. Do not save when you intend to load, right? Don't get those confused. Another thing I like to do, we're trying to keep a small footprint. So a lot of the structures will overlap. It's like a virtual structure. So I like to do this and have some hard copies of those structures. We'll take a look at some of the things that you're going to need for this build. So we got an NPC spawn egg. We'll get into that later. Structure block, obviously. We got some item frame, glow frame. The maps we already talked about. At some point, we'll get into all the redstone, the comparators, the repeaters, all of that goodness. So we're going to create a 40 by 40 by 25, well, technically infinite, but 25 block high footprint here. Now this is important. If you can tell on the map here, I am facing north. Again, if you're going to be following step by step, make sure you're oriented if you're following my coordinates. And I will be using relative coordinates. So if you are facing a different direction, those coordinates will be useless to you. All right, so we've gone 15 blocks up from Bedrock and just gonna build a temporary platform or stage. You can build this temporary platform however you like. You're going to need at least a 10 by 10. We're going to lay down some signs now. Just double check your orientation again. So I'm facing north currently. So I'm going to turn around facing south. We're going to place down 6 signs, skip a space, and place down 6 more signs. And once again, just double check. You should be facing south. We're going to go ahead and label these. So think of this as stage 1, stage 2. We skipped one, just that's on purpose. So we went to stage 4, 5, 6, and now stage 7. We'll circle back to 3, but now jump back to 8, and so on. So once we've got those all labeled, grab a pen, pad of paper, and we're going to want to jot down each of these coordinates. And I would go ahead and jot down the coordinate with the label, if that makes sense. I apologize if some of this is slow and drags on a little bit. I'm doing most of this in real time, writing this down just like you are. And also there'll be moments where I'm trying to calculate the relative coordinates between where we're standing and where we're targeting. So be patient with me. Also, as I've mentioned in other videos, should go without saying, but please pause the video at any time. I know right now it seems like we're moving very slowly, but there will be segments that move very quickly. You need to pause, take screenshots, whatever you got to do to make sure you're capturing all the information. So I've saved a structure of my deck of cards and organized in a way that'll make it easier for me when I go to lay all these things out. I did spend a great deal of time on these. I'm no artist, but I think they turned out all right. Also, too, as you saw in that one segment, I did also create a backing, a kind of default backing design for the card. And we'll be using that as well in our build. And again, I'm looking at my orientation. We're facing north. So we're going to be marking out a section in this corner, in this lower left corner here, in green wool. And this area is where we'll be placing the command blocks for the heart. The heart of this build is going to be this section over here, this chain of commands. All right, so now I'm going to mark a spot. We're going to mark this with red wool. You can pick pretty much any spot you want. I just, we need to have a designated coordinate for our ignition point. We're also going to have our dummy for the back of the deck of cards, and we're going to write down both of those coordinates. All right, impulse unconditional needs redstone. So in this first command, we're actually going to be testing that coordinate for the ignition that I just asked you to write down, that's the function of this first block. So once again, we're doing relative coordinates. So you'll need to figure out the distance in X, Y, and Z from your block to the coordinate you wrote down for the ignition. Now this next part is very important. When it comes to the Y coordinate, make sure you remember, if you're standing on top of the block, then you need to subtract one Y level from it, because it's not measuring on top of the block. It's measuring at the level of the block, if that makes sense. So as you can see there, we tested. It did not find redstone, it found air. And we have successfully found the block we were looking for. Chain, conditional, always active. All of the chain commands blocks in this section of the build, all of these will be conditional and always active. All right, so on this command, we were testing for the green wool. Chain, conditional, always active. All right, I've written down stage 1. So we would go back to our notes and see what the coordinates were for ST1. And then you're going to want to figure out the relative coordinates, X, Y, and Z, from where we're standing to those coordinates. Again, remember, you are standing +1 above the actual coordinates for that command block. So far, so good. And a nice little tip, this will tell you, so you can double check this. And those coordinates do match the target that we were going for. Chain, conditional, always active. When I'm typing a clone command, a lot of times I like to type out all the tildes first. It's just a little time saver, and believe me, all these little, every second you can shave off of repetitious actions in this build, it all adds up. It's going to save you some time. So what we're cloning here, the first 2 sets of tildes, we're cloning the block that is Y -4 directly below us right now. So in that case, that would be the white wool. And we're targeting ST1, which we labeled earlier. And as you can see, we missed it. So I typed in something wrong, but that's okay. This is all part of the process. And there you have it. Just bad math. And I can tell you now, 100 out of 100 mistakes or errors are some kind of programming mistakes. So you find yourself in that funk where something's not working, getting frustrated, take a break, take a breath. Somewhere in the command chain, it's something's incorrect. And we just have to go back, troubleshoot, and fix it. So what we're doing here is we're actually going to change that green wool block to glass. And we're going to do that because each one of these towers that we're creating is a unique tower, and we don't want it to be chosen more than one time. It's a one and done. So that's that function. All right, so here we're going to have a scoreboard, and we're going to add a value to that scoreboard. So in this case, we're chosen to target the player who has the tag Jack, and we'll get into that a little bit more. Chain conditional, always active. Victor Wembanyama. Nope, that's not the command. Same as the previous block, only we're going to add that value to a different scoreboard, which ironically, we won't actually be using that for this stage of the series. That's some more advanced stuff. We'll get into that later. All right, chain conditional, always active. Now in this final block in this chain, we're going to be cloning that dummy backing for the deck. We're going to be cloning that to the ST8 position. So go back to your notes and look at the dummy back coordinate. You're going to type those in twice between the tildes there. If I haven't clarified this before, the first tilde is the X, the second is the Y, and the third is the Z. And the number that comes after that is the positive, negative, or neutral value we want to place on that. So now we'll do some testing. I recommend you do this frequently. So this chain, this first chain is going to be the foundation. It's literally the cornerstone for the this whole portion of the build. So we want to make sure every bit of it is correct, because once we start copying and pasting, if we have even small errors, we're going to have a whole lot of a mess to have to go back and try to clean up. So we need to set up our scoreboard. So let's do scoreboard objectives, add second dummy. That's a / scoreboard objective. Go ahead and enter that. I've already created it in my game here. And we also want to add a prime dummy. Scoreboard objectives, add prime dummy. Now I'm going to add the tag Jack to myself because this command chain uses that tag as a dependent factor. It's only going to target that player. Let's go ahead and change the prime value. I know I typed 2. Go ahead and add 10. You see the syntax error there? That's because we have no value here. But again, don't add 2, add 10. Okay, you'll thank me later. All right, as you can see, our stage is clear, aside from the signs, of course. And we have successfully copied to stage 1 and stage 8, exactly as planned. We want to replace that green wool. So as I was saying earlier, the command chain is testing for that green wool to know if that unique tower has been chosen yet or not. So imagine you have 52 cards in a deck. Well, you don't want the ace of spades played 5 times in the same hand. So we have to have an indicator to tell the computer that card has already been removed for the deck. In this case, we're using the green wool as the indicator. Also, too, if you just noticed, so you see how I clicked the button, but it did not copy the card backing? That is because of another command that we are testing for air. Remember, this chain specifies if it does not find air, it's not going to clone the block. And we do that on purpose. That way we don't end up with 52 different cards in the same slot, right? It's got to choose one, and that's it. One and done. And that's exactly what just happened. All right, so we've got our structure block. This is such a valuable tool. If you're not familiar, it's / give at self structure _ block. Right. So on this side, on this row, we want 9 towers of these identical structure blocks. I'm sorry, these identical command chains. And I'm sure you've noticed I've left that original structure block in place, and I just keep expanding the X coordinate on the save parameters. So now we've got that whole row saved so that we can paste it. We could continue pasting it, creating additional rows. But before we do that, we want to go in and start fine-tuning the unique relative coordinates on each of these, because it's changed, right? It's important to recognize that this tower is 2 blocks closer than the previous tower on the X coordinate. So as we go through from left to right, we're going to go through and subtract 2 from the X coordinate on every single one of these. So now we're getting into the slow and tedious, mind-numbing aspect of the build. So yeah, I guess important to point out, it's reducing by 2 each time. Okay, so now we'll be at 8. If you need to go back and check to see what the previous one was, so that you get the math correct, do it, please. I do it often, as you can see. So we're going to fast forward through this because this is mind-numbing enough as it is. You don't need me droning on and on. The important thing is to make sure as you're going left to right that you're dropping the X on the target and also on the test for. So basically, we're reducing the X to accommodate for the fact that we're moving closer and closer to our target. And as you can see there, I actually go for that one. So important to double check your math. So once you're satisfied that all of the blocks in your row are good to go, then we'll save this again at the structure block and we'll paste it onto the next row. So we're just going to load that same structure that we just saved. But you may have already guessed it, we've just moved 2 blocks closer on the Z coordinate, right? So now we have the pleasure of going through and changing each and every one of these blocks on the Z coordinate. So we're actually adding 2 on this one. And again, double check if you need to. You can see we went from, yeah. So we're adding 2, which is actually going from, yeah. So now the nice thing is, as we go down the line, these are all going to be the same. These are going to be -12, -15, -15, all the way down. We'll fast forward through that. So we're going to rinse and repeat. We'll be posting another row. And I'm sure you guessed it. Now it's going to be -10, -13, -13 as we're adding 2 to each of the Z coordinates. And again, we can fast forward through all this junk. If we could only do that in real life, this build would be far quicker, far simpler. And now we're going to have -8, -11, -11. You might be thinking by this point that this is a larger project than you bargained for. Maybe you're even starting to, oh, oopsie. Let me just fix that. Maybe even starting to feel like this is just too much. And you're probably right. It is a very large, tedious project. However, I will say this. If you've made it this far, you're actually doing quite well, because after this, there's going to be a lot of copying and pasting. It's going to get easier. This is by far the worst stretch of this build. And this is the easiest one yet. All we're doing is removing the one from each of these. I always like to try to make my coordinate save as tight as possible. Never know what you may want to put on the other side of that at a later point. So it's come to my attention that we actually missed the entire top. So just like the lower blocks, we gotta go through and correct this as well. And unfortunately, we had already cut and pasted. But either way, initially it's the X coordinate we have to fix. Once we get that first row done and copy and paste all of that, which I've done here, now we've got to go through and add 2 to all of the Z coordinates. So we're doing the exact same thing we just got through doing on the lower blocks. We just we want to make sure we've got it correct on the command that we're cloning the dummy card. So we'll zip through this. While I realize that I could completely skip through this, I know most of you will get the gist and get the point and probably don't need the block by block. I intentionally rebuilt this this whole build so that we could go step by step from scratch, and I don't want to leave anything to chance. I want to make sure that each and every portion of this build is getting that attention. So please bear with me. And again, the last one will be the easiest. All you're doing is going through and deleting the 1. All right, now we can actually save the heart of this build. And I'm going to label this one Jack uppercase R1. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding two blocks of white wool at each of these corners. If you've done the math already, you may have figured out that we've created 54 towers instead of 52. So I've got 2 dead ones. I'll get into more of that later. It's more of an advanced thing, but I wanted more options for how we run our Redstone connectivity. One of the major downsides to this style of build is for the randomness. For the red signal path, if it only has one path, you're going to have a lot of repeating patterns, which we don't want. So we probably won't get to it in these first couple of videos for this series, but later on we'll build alternative paths in that signal path. Will create much less repetition, and there will not be predictable patterns once we've done that. In the meantime, there'll be noticeable patterns. There's no way around that. That's just the nature of this this style. Whatever you've chosen to use as your deck, go ahead and fill that out. Now, if you've seen here, we're going to go around and replace everywhere there's an ace. We're going to replace the regular frame with a glow frame. And there is a method to my madness. Again, I hate to keep saying I'll explain more later, but I'll explain more later. So once you've got all of your cards placed, now we're going to have to go through and individually make sure that the value assigned to each of these scoreboards matches the value of your card. You may be now realizing why I recommended make 10 the default, because yeah, there's a whole lot more 10s in the deck than anything else. So most probably know, but I'll just go ahead and go through it. An ace is either worth an 11 or a 1. We're going to address the 1 from a different angle, but in the meantime, go ahead and give every ace a value of 11 on the scoreboard. So we're just going to zip through these. All right, so once you've got your values in, we'll go ahead and once again save. So the goal here when you're laying down your redstone signal, and we've got our red wool, our repeater. When you're laying down your redstone signal path, is just take a moment and just make sure that it's going to loop back around and reconnect with itself at some point. I'm using red wool, redstone repeater. If your knee-jerk reaction is concerned that this signal path is going to spit the cards out in the exact same order every time, I would caution you to keep an open mind. Again, there are some things we can do later on to redirect that. So at some point in the series, I'm going to do a video where I demonstrate that we can reroute this signal path in at least 6, maybe 8 different ways, different patterns, probably more than that. And then not only that, eventually we'll have it set up to where it's not reshuffling the deck every hand. So that's another aspect to the unpredictability and avoiding patterns, is at some point it'll be built in that you'll play 6, 7, 8 hands before the deck shuffles again. All right, once you've got all of your comparators placed around where you're confident that the path will meet back up with itself, we'll set this up level with a command block. I like to place the redstone torch down first. You got to be really quick. We're going to place the dust and immediately bust it off. If we're too slow on the draw, the signal is going to be too long, and it's just not as efficient. And again, save often. Something else I recommend doing very frequently: make a copy of the world, back it up, especially when you're testing a new command chain. Back it up. You never know what could go wrong. So as soon as we clear the card, the command chain is it's searching for air right now, right? That signal's going through every single one of those towers, is testing for air. As soon as we clear this off and it finds air, then it should execute that command chain. And not only should we get a new face-up card in its place, we should also get a value on the scoreboard. And there you have it. So I hope this video was useful and maybe even a little bit entertaining. This was part 1 of the BlackJack series. Stay tuned for part 2.